We live in a society full of bullshit because people have a high tolerance of bullshit. Not only do people have a high tolerance of bullshit, but they actually have an appetite for it. That's your simple, basic explanation of what is going on. People have an active appetite for bullshit. People feel attracted to it and they don't want to give it up. They don't want to live without bullshit because they're addicted to it. They're actually addicted to bullshit. And like any other thing that people claim that they cannot live without. Any other addiction. An addiction is when somebody claims they can't live without something. Whether it's addiction to cigarettes, to alcohol, to drugs, to coffee, to fast food and oils and sugars, to meat, whatever it is that people claim that they can't live without. Then the question becomes, let us look at ourselves. Let us look at ourselves and the things we claim that we cannot live without, and look at what the results are on our lives of living with these things. So you claim that you can't live without cigarettes, but then what is the result of the cigarettes? You end up having lung cancer. So is it really more difficult to live without cigarettes than it is to live with cigarettes? The results of living with cigarettes and not being able to dispense with their use is that you end up being in a lot more difficult situation, a lot less sustainable situation when you end up finding that you have lung cancer or just emphysema. Emphysema isn't cancer, it's just shortness of breath. Because why? Because lungs were meant to sort out oxygen from the air. Lungs were not meant to absorb carbon fumes of fire. And that's what you're doing when you're breathing smoke. You're doing something that's destructive to your lungs that they're not designed to handle. So that's people claiming that they can't live without cigarettes. The question is, how much harder is it for you to live with cigarettes? Same thing, everything with drugs, whether it's prescription medications or illegal narcotic drugs, so-called narcotics. Drugs are separated into either illegal or legal by prescription, or else unregistered, unidentified drugs. And people with addictions, drug addictions, claim that they cannot live without whatever drugs they happen to be addicted to. But then the question becomes for them to look at their lives and ask themselves, how well are they able to live with these drugs? Are they really living better with these drugs than they would without them? Is it really harder to live without these things than with them? And it seems to me the answer is pretty clear. No. People are addicted to fast food. Is it harder for you to live? Would it be harder for you to live without your high sodium, high oil, high sugar content fast food than it is for you to live with them, and your obesity and your diabetes and all the related issues to that? All of them, hundreds of related issues related to diabetes, related to diet. And yet the majority of people, or a huge percentage of people in this country, claim they cannot live without these things that are killing them. So that's the situation with our society, and it's bullshit. People are addicted to bullshit. Not only have they grown to tolerate bullshit, but they've actually grown to feel dependent on it. And the question becomes, if you think you cannot live, if you feel like you cannot live without bullshit, the question is, how well are you living with bullshit? How well are you living with bullshit? So there you go. People living with bullshit, addicted to bullshit, and you can't get them to stop for even one day. Can you get people to even stop for one day and say, look, just can we spend 24 hours or even 12 hours where we drop all the bullshit and try to be honest for change? Try to be direct and honest about what's really going on in our lives. Because that's the problem with bullshit, is it's all fakeness and insincerity, and people spend their lives going through a pantomime, playing a charade, where they pretend it's the Emperor's New Clothes. That's it. I mean, The Emperor's New Clothes by Hans Andersen is the essential written story describing, summing up the political process. The political process is summed up by The Emperor's New Clothes, and the whole peer pressure trickery of the whole game. The whole game where people are not willing to come right out and call a spade and see things for what they are, and say it out loud, and say it directly and explicitly, and say this is what I see, instead of this is what's happening. Instead of people sitting around and say, well, you may be right, but then on the other hand, well, the technical growth of the printed sector and the statistical provisions gives us on Article 3, page 4, and all this bullshit, all this flim-flam, jargonistic, legalese bullshit of everything trying to sound big fancy words to put people to sleep and to alienate them, and to make it so that a certain large proportion of the population doesn't even know what the hell you're talking about anymore, because you're so busy talking in these technical legalese terms, and spend all your time with your meetings or talking about your laws and your bylaws and your minutes of the last meeting and rules of order, rules of procedure, and all this bullshit to try to turn life into some kind of a neurotic fixation on procedure and technocracy. And there's always somebody with the positions of power and authority that we have to bow down to, somebody with a gavel that they're going to start banging if they don't like something you say, or they think that you've gone 3 seconds over the time limit. Bangity bang bang bang, you have to stop talking, or we're going to call the cops, have you escorted out of here. All this bullshit. It's all fucking technocratic, proceduristic bullshit of paint by numbers robotic approach to being a human being and living a life. And it's about time, even if just for one day in your whole fucking, just to take one holiday out of your whole fucking bullshit addicted life, to say we're going to take one day off and behave and think as human beings and not as robots whose attitude towards life is a paint by numbers, step by step, follow the instruction manual procedure of everything you do, and you have to put then the instructions say put the left foot forward 6 inches, now pause, now put your right foot forward. Instead of just doing that, just come out and put one foot in front of the other and walk like a natural human being, or talk like a natural human being, instead of piecing together all these legalistic terms and all these little phrases from Latin, and so that the average person doesn't know what the fucking hell you're talking about. Let's just say what you're talking about, say what you mean, and mean what you say, and say it in plain English. And that's the fucking problem with politics. This is all for this bullshit of trying to remove it from being plain English and plain thinking and plain human experience of life, and turning life into, and society into, something robotic, something like designing microchips, or designing transistors. It's sort of schematics that these bullshitters like to turn politics into a system of engineering design, where it's as if you're designing schematics for transistor radio, and you have to go step by step, and everything's technical, and nothing is particularly human, or on a human scale, or in plain English. And that's what we need. We need to be able to say, okay, here, what's going on here? What's really going on here? And let's just say it in plain English. And so we have a problem in our town. We have a conflict about a disagreement about what should be done about, let's say, about some issue, whether it's a school or it's open space or development or traffic or whatever it is. There's some disagreement, and I say, if in that situation, Let people talk in plain English instead of going up and saying, well, now I have to refer to Article 3 and the Honorable so-and-so from Section so-and-so has said this, however, is stating in the place, in the whereas this is, all this bullshit. And such as. Because the people in Iraq and such as and so forth and therefore and so on and such like. That kind of talk. You see that? You think that teen Carolina girl was such an idiot. In a sense, she wasn't. I mean, she was an empty, airheaded idiot who didn't know what the hell she was saying, but she was doing what she was expected, what she knew she was expected to try to sound intellectual. That was the problem. She knew that she was expected to try to sound intellectual in her response to this semi-bogus question that was presented to her about why most Americans can't even find America on a map because they're fucking ignorant. And she tried to sound technical and informed and intelligent in her response by using big sounding words and phrases, and such as, and therefore, and such like, and the Iraq, and the South Africa. The reason, therefore, I believe U.S. Americans. She was just trying to sound intellectual, and in a way she was more genuine because it was clear with her that it was just bullshit. It was clear that it was just a bullshit pantomime, whereas with the people who get away with it all the time, the people we call our respected leaders, they actually get away with it, with spewing this bullshit at us, and we act as if it's sensible and they are to be respected for it. When what we really fucking need is people to cut the bullshit and start talking like human beings. So if you got a problem with open space, instead of saying, referring to Article 6 of the amendment of the bylaws, blah 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 of 1643, therefore amended by the appeal of blah blah blah, and the further court of the Supreme Court of the Appeals overturned the rules of blah blah blah. Instead of that, we can just say, look, here's a parcel of woods, and there's animals living here, and it makes it a pleasant open space that people can walk through, and if you plow it down and build a parking lot, it's going to be ugly and suck, and it's not going to make us have a more comfortable community. And just say it in plain English. So one of the rules of bullshit is obfuscation, of using big fancy sounding language to try to cover up what you're actually talking about, and also to try to just psych people out and put people to sleep with the fact that you're perpetrating a technocracy where everything's about rules of procedure and orders of business and all of this bullshit. And if you're out of order because you said something, you didn't say it in precisely the right manner and didn't make precisely the right motion, and you didn't use these Latin phrases in and all, and bullshit this and bullshit that. So let's be straightforward, straight talking people who can call a spade and say what we mean and mean what we say, and say it in plain English so it can be understood by everybody, and everybody can consider what is actually being discussed and come to a reasonable, genuine conclusion. Instead of half the time people don't even know what the proposal that you're discussing, supposedly debating, is supposed to be about, because they can't understand it because it's so full of all this bullshit that's incomprehensible to most people, and is designed for the purpose of being incomprehensible, deliberately designed for the purpose of being incomprehensible, to make it to make this information and understanding of what the debate is about inaccessible to the average person. So the average person can't even, if they disagree, can't even come forward and express to you the fact that they disagree, because they're not even sure what the hell you're talking about, the way you're putting it. So rule number one, if we want to make a society that's not run by bullshit, is to use plain language, plain English. And stop bullshitting around with this technical jargon, because that's what the bullshitters love. The bullshitters, that's their game. They know that's one of their main tools, is to use this technical type of language, this legalistic bullshit. So therefore I say, better not bigger, up not down, and always twirling, twirling, twirling towards bullshit. What's this, some kind of a YouTube? Well, just don't blame me. I voted for Todos. Beep, beep.